Hi, I'm Mark Lutz, and along with my wife Lisa, we've been attending this church for about 5 years. And last summer, I took my 6-year-old grandson from New York City on a fishing expedition. With pole over shoulder, we trekked all the way to Lake Ellyn. And there, standing on the pier, we'd cast our rod into that huge lake. Well, maybe 5 feet into that lake. But with every cast, that little red and white bobber would land kerplunk in the water, sending out concentric waves in every direction. And in my mind's eye, that bobber is this church. And you and I are those waves, taking what we have received here beyond our walls to wherever the Spirit leads us. I'm not uncomfortable to tell you I am rich. During my entire life, I have been the fortunate beneficiary of the generosity of others, and most of all, of God's unmerited favor. I was born just down the road in Elmhurst. Didn't stay long. My father resigned from his position as the youth minister at a Presbyterian church in Cicero. And then we, with my 3-year-old brother, head out on my parents' trek to New York Harbor, where we boarded a ferry and set sail for South Africa, where they spent the next 25 years as missionaries. At that time, that was about a month-long journey across the Atlantic and then down the west coast of Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, and finally porting on the east coast of that huge continent. And due to the distance and cost, we'd come back to the States every 5 years. So I was 6 years old during that first furlough. And my parents spent the better part of that year trying to raise the money so that they could go back to Africa. There were no salaries other than what they could raise from their friends and churches. Plus, they had to raise the money for their ministry. And by that time, we were a family of 7. And like gypsies, we lived out of a trailer, roaming from church to church, asking basic strangers for money. My brother and I were in first grade and second grade at that time, and my parents enrolled us in the public schools wherever we went. So I went to 6 schools that first year. Yet despite that inconvenience, from childhood, I've been the beneficiary of 2 interconnected, invaluable gifts. On one hand, I witnessed this incredible and utter dependence on God by my parents for safety and for meeting all their needs. And on the other, the reckless generosity of Jesus' followers. And I watched as my parents started a youth ministry in Soweto, that black township just outside of Johannesburg, where all the laboring people who were black were forced by law to live. And aware of my parents' sacrificial lifestyle and mindful of the generosity of others who enabled them to do their work, I grew up never questioning that tithing 10% of everything I owned was the norm. So whether I mowed lawns or bussed tables, the first 10 cents of every rand was God's. And though that's really not what Jesus teaches, it's what I did then and what I continue to do today. When I was 18, my elder brother and I came back to this country, enrolled in costly private Christian colleges. And our parents in Africa had no spending money to send us, let alone money for books or tuition. I worked several jobs every year, but really what made my education affordable was the generosity of alumni who donated scholarships for missionary kids like me. And being 10,000 miles away, I went home only once during those 4 years. So every summer and Christmas holiday, different friends and their families took me in as one of their own. And their generosity helped fill those lonely and homesick gaps. And it's because of the radical generosity I've experienced from others and God's abundant blessing on me that I count it a privilege today to raise money for some of the poorest people in the world. For the last 30 years, I've worked for an international not-for-profit organization that does microenterprise development. We make very small loans to extremely poor people, mainly mothers, so they can start little businesses and feed their families and send their kids to school. Which brings me right back full circle to that little red bobber and those concentric circles of influence. This building and this campaign are nothing but the tools to equip each one of us to do the work that God has called us to do, whether it's in DuPage County or Chicago, or in my case, the developing world. As followers of Jesus, we're all trying to emulate his example of love and to continue his mission of justice. And we all do it in our own unique corner of God's vineyard. And we all depend on this community to build us up. We come here to be inspired and trained and instructed and re-energized. And we recognize that this building is our home, a building generously provided for us by people who came before us, much like the scholarships when I went to college and my parents' passage to Africa. Clearly, I am rich. By virtue of being born in Elmhurst and not in the lowest caste in India or a sugar plantation in Haiti or a black person in South Africa, I have hit life's jackpot. And so it is out of gratitude that I join you in generously supporting this campaign called forward. Thank you.